The body was face down in the creek when I found it. Samuel Boone wasn't the kind of man you expected to die with unfinished business. He was methodical. Clean boots, tidy ledger books, and a routine that could set your watch. We'd been neighbors 10 years and maybe spoke a dozen times, mostly about livestock, weather, or fences. But that morning I noticed his cows lowing at the edge of my property line, hungry and unwatered. That was the first sign something was wrong. I found him caught in the reeds by the bend where the creek slows and deepens. No wounds, no blood, just dead. His hat floating 5 feet upstream. I dragged him out, soaked and heavy, then knelt beside him, trying to make sense of what I saw. His face was peaceful, too peaceful. No grimace, no struggle. But his right hand was clenched around something, a paper, crumpled, wet, nearly falling apart. 7 names scribbled in his sharp handwriting. At the bottom, he knows. I burned that note an hour later. That was 3 days ago. The town doctor called it heart failure. Sheriff didn't argue. Neither did I. But then this morning, as the wind picked up and the sky threatened snow, there was a knock at my door. Not a friendly knock. Not someone asking for sugar or a saddle stitched. This was the kind of knock that told you the world was about to change. I opened it to find a girl, no, a young woman standing there with her jaw clenched tight, green eyes fierce under the shadow of a ragged bonnet. Her coat was too thin for the weather, and her boots were caked in dried mud. Behind her stood 6 more girls, younger, thinner, looking at me like strays outside a butcher's window. "I'm Tessa Boone," she said, voice flat but clear. "These are my sisters." I just stood there, holding the door like a fool. My eyes darted behind her, half expecting to see a wagon or an escort, something that made sense. There was nothing, just wind and sky and desperation. "Our father is dead," she said, "and we need protection. Now?" I looked down the road, heart starting to hammer. "Where's your mother?" "Gone 6 years." It was just us and Pa. I let out a slow breath. "You think whoever killed Samuel is coming for you next?" Tessa's eyes didn't flinch. "I know they are." That was when she said the words that changed everything. "We offer ourselves to your name, Judson Pryor, all 7 of us, if you'll have us. Legally, if it must be. In God's eyes, if it helps. But we need a man on our side." I took a step back, throat dry. "You're asking me to marry you?" "To protect us," she said. "To give us your name, your land, and a chance to live." The youngest girl behind her, no older than 10, grabbed her sister's coat and stared up at me with hollow eyes. That did it. I didn't say yes. Not with words. I stepped aside and opened the door. Tessa didn't wait for an invitation. Once the door opened, she moved like a commander leading a retreat. Not desperate, deliberate. Each sister followed, filing into my home like soldiers obeying silent orders. The youngest clung to Tessa's hand, while the second eldest, maybe 16, glanced at me like she was already sizing me up for trustworthiness. None of them cried. None of them spoke. It was eerie. My cabin was built for 1 man and 1 hard life. 1 table, 1 bed, 1 rocking chair, and a stove that creaked louder than it heated. And now it held 7 more bodies, 7 different sizes of coats and worn shoes, the air thick with the scent of cold skin, horse sweat, and uncertainty. Tessa stood in the center of the room and scanned it like she owned the deed. Her eyes paused on the rifle over the mantel, the lockbox tucked behind the stove, the food stores in the corner. "Not judgmental, strategic. You've got flour, beans, salt pork. Maybe enough for a week if you stretch it," she said, her back still to me. "We'll need more before snow traps us in." I blinked. "You seem to know your way around survival." "My father taught me." She turned to face me. "Before they killed him, I froze." "You said he died. Don't insult me, Mr. Pryor. Pa was healthy. No illness. No warning. Just dead in the creek." She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small cloth pouch. When she loosened the drawstring, I saw what had cost him his life. Gold, refined. Not flecks, dash, chunks. She tossed it onto the table, where it landed with a sound heavier than its weight. "There's more where that came from," she said quietly. "A vein runs right under your land. And ours. He mapped it, hid the proof. I stared at the gold, then her. Why bring it to me? Because someone already killed for it. And if we're right, they'll kill again. She pulled a folded, water-stained paper from her coat. These are the maps. Survey markers. Pa didn't tell anyone until he was sure. She laid it flat across my table. Red circles, coordinates, soil test notes. And then my name, scrawled next to his in his handwriting. He trusted you, she said. I think he meant to share this with you. But he didn't get the chance. I reached for the paper, my fingers numb. I'd always known Samuel to be quiet, not secretive. But this was something else. Why would you risk coming here? Why not run? Tess's voice didn't crack. Because this land is ours. Because we're not prey. And because I'd rather stand and fight beside someone honest than hide behind someone who won't bleed for what's right. The cabin felt smaller. The air thicker. The future more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. I looked at the gold again. The map. The 6 young faces now curled up on my floor, warming by my stove, trusting a stranger because they had no other choice. Judson, she said. Using my name for the first time, I looked up. I don't need charity, she said. I need an ally. I nodded slowly. Then I guess I'm in. The knock came just after dawn. Not the desperate pounding of someone seeking shelter. Not the soft courtesy of a neighbor. It was slow, measured, the kind of knock that tells you the man on the other side isn't asking. I was already dressed. Hadn't slept much. Tessa and the girls were quiet in the back room. She'd bedded them down like a field medic, arranging the blankets with efficiency. I didn't question. I opened the door and came face to face with Marcus Finn, territorial official. Suited like a banker, but eyes like a snake's. Beside him stood 2 men with badges I didn't recognize, probably his own hires, not lawmen. Their boots were clean, but their knuckles weren't. "Mornin', Mr. Pryor," Finn said, tipping his bowler hat with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sorry to disturb you so early." "Then don't," I replied flatly. He laughed like we were old friends. "We've come about Samuel Boone. You found him, didn't you?" I nodded once. "Dead in the creek. Tragic," he said. But here's the strange part: his pocket watch was missing. Sentimental piece. Gold case. Engraved initials. Strange thing for a man to lose. He reached into his coat and pulled it out. I recognized it instantly. "I found it yesterday," he continued. "Just on the inside of your fence. Curious place for it to end up, wouldn't you say?" I didn't answer. Finn stepped closer. "Judson, we both know the wilderness can swallow secrets. But sometimes secrets float. Like bodies. And pocket watches." His men didn't move, but their eyes were already on the tracks near the barn. 7 sets. I hadn't had time to cover them. One of them crouched and called out, "Small feet." Kids, maybe. Or women. Finn raised an eyebrow. Funny thing. Samuel Boone had 7 daughters. Not one's been seen in town since the funeral. He stepped past me, uninvited, but I blocked the doorway. "Back up, Finn. I'm an officer of the territory. No warrant. No invitation. No entry." My voice was steel. "This here's still my land, and I still got rights." He smirked. "And what exactly are you hiding that you'd cite rights over hospitality?" I stared him down. Maybe I just don't like snakes on my porch. Finn didn't move, didn't blink. He just stared back, calculating. Finally, he tucked the watch back in his coat. "I'm giving you a chance, Pryor. Turn over anything you found: papers, gold, girls, whatever Samuel left behind. Save yourself the trouble." I didn't flinch. "You're not the law. You're a man in a hat with a gun. And I ain't scared of either." He gave a tight smile. "You should be." Then he turned on his heel, his men following like shadows. They mounted up and rode off without another word. When the dust settled, Tessa stepped out from the back room. "He knows we're here," she said. I nodded. "We don't run now. We stand." Her voice was steady, but her eyes were storm-dark. "Then we'd better start preparing." I looked out over the plains, empty, quiet, watching. The war hadn't started yet, but the battle lines had just been drawn. By midday, word had traveled. No one in Paradise Creek had seen Finn, but they'd felt his pressure. Store clerks suddenly asking questions about the Boone girls. The banker delaying Tessa's withdrawal of her father's account. One neighbor swore he saw riders pacing the edge of our land, not crossing the fence, but close enough to see our smoke. Tessa stood on the porch beside me, arms crossed over her chest, eyes tracking every distant flicker of movement like a hawk. There wasn't a trace of fear in her posture, just calculation. A woman bracing for the next storm. We didn't speak for a while. Just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, watching the wind stir dust devils across the empty stretch between us and the tree line. "You ever been married, Mr. Pryor?" she finally asked. I shook my head. "Never had reason." She turned to look at me. "You do now." I met her gaze. She wasn't flirting. She wasn't smiling. She was deadly serious. Marcus Finn can threaten the land, the house, the gold. But if we're family legally bound, it complicates things. Makes it harder for him to act fast. "You want a marriage license to slow down a snake," I said. "I want a shield. One he can't pierce with words or forged papers. And I'm offering one in return." We both looked out over the field. Two men on horseback appeared just at the far ridge, silhouettes against the pale sky. Watching. Waiting. "Finn came to us in Sweetwater a few weeks back," Tessa said, voice low. "Didn't ask for permission. Came straight into our home. Said our father owed the territory back taxes. Said we had 10 days to leave the property, unless we sold the mineral rights." She shook her head. "Pa knew it was a lie. But he also knew we were alone. He wanted to scare you off," I said. "Or make an example," she replied. Inside, the girls were helping each other peel potatoes. The scent of something warm drifted through the air. Tessa had wasted no time putting them to work, making my cold cabin feel like a home that had been lived in for years. That should have comforted me. It didn't. Single quotes. Later that evening, a rider approached. Not Finn. A younger man in a gray coat with a wax-stamped envelope. He didn't dismount. Just handed it over and turned his horse without a word. Tessa slid it open while I watched her face tighten. "It's from Finn," she said. "He's invoking territorial repossession orders. Claims Samuel's land and any adjoining property with suspicious ownership overlap may be seized at sunrise if no compliance is met." I stared at the paper. "He's coming tomorrow," she nodded, "and he's bringing more than words this time." I took the letter and tossed it straight into the fire. Tessa watched it burn. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. "I was ready the minute I opened that door," I said. Her voice softened just a fraction. "Then I'll stand with you." That night we sat at the table, drawing out plans, positioning the girls near exits, reinforcing windows, cleaning rifles. Tessa tied her hair back and rolled up her sleeves like a soldier readying for siege. As the fire crackled low and the wind beat against the shutters, she looked at me once more. "I wasn't raised to beg, Judson. I was raised to lead. But I can't lead this alone." "You're not alone," I said, and I meant it. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Tessa. We sat by the fire long after the girls were asleep, going over every possibility, routes of retreat, where to stash the maps and gold samples, even what to say if Finn rode in with more legal tricks. The flames cast flickering light over her face, sharpening her cheekbones, softening the guarded lines in her brow. She wasn't just brave, she was worn down to something raw and beautiful. "I used to think a man like you was just a myth," she said quietly, staring into the embers. "What kind of man is that?" "Stubborn, quiet, honest, the kind that doesn't ask what he gets in return." I shrugged. "Maybe I'm just lonely." She looked at me then, not out of pity, but like she was finally seeing the truth of what lived behind my eyes. "Lonely men don't take in 7 strangers and face down a corrupt official with a death wish." Her voice softened. "You're not just protecting us. You're risking everything." I stood, pacing slowly to the window. The sky was paling at the edges. Morning wasn't far. I felt it rising in my chest, that thing I hadn't let myself name. "Tessa," I said, turning toward her, "I need to ask you something that has nothing to do with safety or strategy or scaring Finn off." She sat straighter. "I want to marry you." Her lips parted, breath catching. Judson ... double quotes. "I don't mean just for legal cover. I mean it honest. I mean it forever." For the first time since she'd arrived, Tessa looked uncertain. "You barely know me." I know enough. I know the way you took charge when everything was falling apart. I know the way you watch your sisters like a hawk but hold them like a mother. I know you haven't cried once, not because you don't feel, but because you don't have the luxury. She blinked fast. I know I want to build a life with someone who carries her family on her back without ever asking to be rescued. Silence stretched between us, long and heavy. She rose to her feet, walking over to me, slow, deliberate. But what happens, she said, her voice low, when the law burns the paper that binds us? When they don't care about vows made in candlelight? When gold talks louder than a wedding band? I didn't hesitate. Then I still choose you. And we rebuild, together. She searched my face. Whatever she found there, it was enough. All right, she whispered. We stood there, hands not quite touching, eyes locked. Outside, the wind shifted. In here, everything settled. We'll say the vows at sunrise, she said. Let him find us joined, not just hiding. A noise from the back room, one of the girls stirring. Tessa turned, but not before brushing her fingers lightly against mine. That simple touch felt more binding than any contract. I went to the barn, dug out my old Sunday shirt. She pulled her hair back and tucked a ribbon behind her ear. And as the first light spilled across the porch, we stood side by side, alone but not lonely. I, Judson Pryor, I began, voice steady. And I, Tessa Boone, she replied, her voice full of something I hadn't heard in days. Hope. No preacher. No crowd. Just two souls pledging loyalty before a rising sun. Let the law come. We were already a family. The hoofbeats came just past noon, echoing down the valley like distant thunder. But this time it wasn't Marcus Finn or his private muscle. Sheriff William Hayes rode up front, badge gleaming beneath his duster, followed by two federal marshals I'd never seen before, straight-backed, no nonsense, and very clearly not on anyone's payroll but Uncle Sam's. Tessa stood beside me on the porch, her hair braided back, her wedding band still warm from the morning sun. She didn't flinch when the men dismounted, didn't soften. She stood like a woman ready to face whatever verdict came next. Hayes removed his hat and nodded at her respectfully. Mrs. Pryor. Tessa blinked once. I'd never seen a title hit someone so hard and so deep. Sheriff, I said, stepping forward, you're a few hours early for a funeral. Hayes gave a grim half-smile. We're not here to bury anyone, Judson. We're here to stop a man from becoming a murderer. He handed me a folded letter, sealed in red wax. Finn's being investigated. Land fraud. Forged tax notices. Bribes. Even a suspected poisoning your neighbor, Samuel Boone, included. My jaw clenched. You're saying he killed Samuel? We're saying we've got cause to believe he did, said one of the marshals. And you're not the only neighbor he tried to squeeze. Tessa let out a long, slow breath. Her grip on my arm tightened for just a second. We've frozen his authority as of this morning, Hayes said. But word is, he's riding out here anyway. Not as a government man this time, just a desperate one. My blood went cold. How soon? Could be minutes. Could be hours. But he's coming. Hayes looked around at the cabin, the girls watching from the window, the rifle I'd leaned against the porch rail. He saw everything in one sweep. We'll stay until he shows, he said. You've got backup now. For the first time since this started, I let out a breath that didn't taste like iron. Tessa turned to me. We're not alone anymore, I nodded. No, and we're not afraid either. The marshals set up in the barn loft, rifles in hand. Hayes stood at the edge of the porch like a statue carved from pine. Tessa went inside and moved the girls into the cellar, just in case. The stove was still warm from breakfast, the scent of cornbread and smoke lingering in the air, mocking the storm about to roll in. And yet, something had shifted. We weren't cornered anymore. We had truth on our side, law on our side, but men like Finn didn't care about truth. They cared about survival, power, taking what wasn't theirs. We knew he'd come. The question now was whether he'd ride in looking for redemption or a bloodletting. Dusk began to fall. The wind turned sharp, carrying the scent of pine and distant gun oil. I checked my rifle again. Tessa stood in the doorway behind me, her hand on my shoulder. We stand, she whispered. I nodded. Together, and then we waited. He came alone. Just past sundown, the sound of a single horse cut through the stillness like a knife through cotton. We stepped out onto the porch as he crested the ridge Marcus Finn, once proud in his tailored suit, now a shadow of himself. His coat flapped open, half-buttoned, his hat gone. His eyes, those eyes weren't smug anymore. They were wild. He didn't dismount. Just sat there in the saddle, swaying slightly, a rifle strapped across his chest and a revolver riding low on his hip. "Judson," he shouted, voice cracking against the wind. "You've got something of mine." Hayes stepped forward from the edge of the porch, badge gleaming under the lantern light. "It's over, Finn. Orders came down this morning. You're suspended pending federal investigation." Finn laughed, high and sharp. "Don't quote papers to me, Hayes. I wrote half of them. This whole territory runs on bribes and handshakes, yours included." "No more," Hayes said. "You're done." Finn's gaze snapped to me, then to Tessa, who stood half-shadowed in the doorway, her wedding ring catching the glow. His mouth curled into something between a snarl and a grin. "She was supposed to run," he muttered. "That was the deal. Her father gives me the map, I make the tax debt vanish, and they vanish with it. But he got greedy. Thought he could outsmart me." "He didn't die of greed," I said, stepping forward. "You poisoned him." Finn's jaw ticked. "He gave me no choice." Behind me I felt the marshals shift in the dark. Hayes rested his hand lightly on his pistol. One wrong move and the sky would split open. "You still think this ends with a jail cell?" Finn asked. "You think men like me go quietly?" "No," I said. "But they still fall." Finn's horse took a nervous step forward. "I lost everything because of that old man." He spat. "You think I'll let some backwoods rancher and a dirt-poor widow take what's left?" Hayes didn't speak. He didn't have to, because Finn reached for his rifle. The crack of gunfire lit the night. Hayes's shot hit first clean, through the shoulder. Finn's rifle clattered to the dirt, his body spinning from the force before crashing to the ground. He lay there groaning, blood spreading across the frost-covered grass. The marshals were on him in seconds. It was over. No drama. No speech. Just the end of a man who thought fear would make him untouchable. Tessa moved beside me, quiet and steady. "He knew he was finished the moment he saw the ring," she said. I looked down at her, remembering those first words on my porch. "We offer ourselves to your name. All 7 of us are yours. Judson Pryor," she whispered. "If you'll still have us." I didn't answer her with words. I pulled her close, held her tight, felt her heart beating against mine, because this time it wasn't about protection or alliances or survival. It was about love. Plain and simple. And we'd just earned the right to live it. 3 months later, the Pryor ranch didn't look like it used to. There were new fences, a second well, a freshly built bunkhouse where the girls took turns hanging laundry and arguing about whose stew recipe was better. Laughter rang through the trees now, instead of silence, but the gold stayed buried right where Samuel had hidden it. We'd sold only what we needed. Enough to buy the land outright in Tessa's name. Enough to make sure no man, not ever again, could claim we didn't belong here. I still woke early, but not alone. Tessa lay beside me most mornings, arm draped across my chest, her hair loose and tangled like wild grass. She smiled in her sleep sometimes. I'd never known what peace looked like until I saw the girls called me Mr. Judson at first, then just Judge. Even the littlest, Miriam, who never spoke a word the first week, now climbed into my lap with her favorite book and a crooked grin. Sometimes I sat on the porch at dusk, watching them run through the fields, and I wondered how a man like me, quiet, scarred, content and loneliness, ended up at the center of so much life. Tessa joined me one evening, her hand slipping into mine like it had always belonged there. "You regret it?" she asked softly. "Letting us in?" I turned, kissed her knuckles. "No," I said. "Only regret is not doing it sooner." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "He'd be proud, you know." "My father," I nodded, eyes stinging a little. "He trusted me. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving he was right, too." We sat there as the sun dipped low, casting golden light across a land hard won and fiercely kept. The past was buried, and the future was growing wild right in front of us. Not just land, not just love, but family.